Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for being here, welcome if you are new, and thank you for stopping by. Today we're going to take a look at all of my watercolor supplies. Everything, well not everything, but what I use the most for watercolor, like what sketchbook I'm using or the paints that I'm working with. In quite a few of my YouTube videos, I often get questions about which sketchbook or watercolors I use, so I'm happy to share all of that with you today. So this is the sketchbook that I use for my watercolors. It's from my paper world. It has 300 GSM and it has 100% cotton paper. I will link it in the description down below in case you're interested. And quick note, this video isn't sponsored in any way and the links are not affiliate. I bought everything myself. So one of the paintings that I did in here recently, I also made a video on it, and in case you're interested, I'll link it up here. I made in this sketchbook, and I usually don't paint on loose sheets because I don't like to have them scattered all over the house, so that's why I prefer using a watercolor sketchbook. I try to treat the pages as finished pieces, and if I ever want to create something that I would like to hang on the wall or give as a gift, then I'll be using a loose watercolor sheet. The one that I use for that is the Bauhong Academy watercolor paper. This watercolor paper also contains 300 GSM with 100% cotton paper, and the sides are sort of glued, and then I paint on top of it and then I can remove it with a palette knife. Now this is pretty much everything I usually use as a surface for watercolor painting. Of course, over the years I've tested quite a few different papers, and I might still have some of them laying around, but I don't really tend to like reach for them. Most of my paintings are rather done in a sketchbook, or if I wanted to be on a loose sheet of paper, then in this Bauhong pad. Okay, so before we talk about brushes, let's quickly talk about water. I always keep a water jar with me, usually just one. But best practice though is to have two jars, one for rinsing your brushes and the second one with clean water, or to give your brushes a second rinse so you always keep your colors vibrant. This jar I'm currently using is a bit nasty. It definitely needs a good clean. It's actually a broken jar from the kitchen, so I decided to repurpose it for painting because it's very handle with the handle. Yeah, and now back to the brushes. I do own several brushes, but the ones I reach for the most, like 90% of the time, are these three. So this first one is a no-name brand watercolor brush. I really love it. I think you can find it, you can find something similar on Amazon or AliExpress. There's no label on it anymore. The name has like completely faded, and I don't even remember what size it was originally. It's also sort of like almost went out of the body of the brush. I tried to like squeeze it back in and glue it, but despite all of that, it's a great brush, and I use it probably like I don't know, most of the time. This second one is also a brush that I use a lot. It's from my paper world and it is size 6. So as you can see, as a comparison, the no-name brand one is almost the same size as the my paper world one. A little bit bigger, I think it's like maybe size 8. But the my paper world I really like because it has a sort of thin tip, so it's really nice for like small details. And it's also really good quality. Yeah, this last one is the Malevich watercolor brush. It's the Claude size 4. Another thing I use a lot when I'm painting with watercolor is an old rag or a towel, sometimes even scraps of old clothing that I don't wear anymore, especially the ones with holes. I always keep one nearby because it's super handy, especially when I'm painting florals. Before we go into the paint, I also use a masking tape. This is a masking tape that you can just get from your own, your local hardware store. I also have this washi tape. This washi tape sticks less to the paper. Well, it does stick well, but it actually doesn't rip the paper as much as the masking tape. But it's a little bit more expensive than the masking tape because I think I paid like €2 for 10 meters of washi tape, whereas I paid the same price for this huge masking tape from the hardware store. Okay, so now on to the bigger part, which is watercolors. So I have two main palettes that I mostly use for my paintings, which are this one. So here are just my regular watercolors. And I also have a second one, which is this one, which contains my pastel watercolors. I also use this spray bottle that contain a mix of distilled water and clove bud oil. The clove bud oil is meant to help prevent mold, although I'm not sure it really makes a difference for my watercolors since they don't contain honey. Plus, I don't actually spray all of my watercolors, only some of them need a little pre-wetting before use. I use this spray bottle interchangeably with my gouache, and that's actually the main reason I add the clove bud oil in it, to help protect my gouache from molding. So let's first start with this palette, and then later on we are going to move with this one. I've already prepared a kind of a swatch chart up here where I'll be swatching all of them, and I recently rearranged the layout of this palette. I sort of swapped out some colors and gave away or sold the ones that I wasn't really using anymore. So now what's left are the ones that I use the most and I tend to reach for the most often. We're going to swatch each of them and I'll share with you which ones I use and I like the most. Okay, so first we have this yellow by White Knight. It's a really nice opaque yellow. I use it really a lot, and the pen that I have now is like almost empty, and I already have a replacement pen. One downside to this paint is that, well, maybe it does depend on the person, but I find it to smell quite strong, and I'm quite of a sensitive person, so perhaps that's why I smell it more. Because sometimes when the sun shines on my palette and I've forgotten to close the blinds and I open my watercolor palette, it smells very strong. Okay, next is the Van Gogh Yellow Ochre. This came from that set of 15, and I moved it here because I really liked it, and it's also quite a fun opaque yellow ochre. The next one is Quinacridone Gold by Rosa Gallery. This one is one of my absolute favorite color. I'm thinking even of trying it also from different brands to compare because Queen Gold is just such a beautiful color, especially for mixing natural looking greens. Then I have Burnt Sienna from Rosa Gallery, just a classic earthy orange. Next is Red Iron Hematite by White Knights, or Red, I think, no, Red Brown Hematite. I can't read it very well. Red Brown Hematite. It's a really beautiful brown. I find it to be sort of neutral. It leans a little orange, as you can see, but compared to the rest of the palette, it's somewhat in between yellow and red. Then I have some more reddish browns like Royal Brown from Rosa Gallery, as well as the Mars Brown from White Knights, which is nice and opaque. And then I have this Caput Mortuum by White Knights. It's officially labeled as non-granulating, but I find that it does granulate and I use it a lot for my granulation mixes. Next is the Naples Orange by White Knights. It's a soft, more opaque pastel-like color, and I think you might notice a pattern by now. I tend to prefer semi-opaque watercolors over transparent ones. Then there's Golden by White Knights. It's a nice, balanced orange that's not too strong. I used to have the Pyrrole Orange here, but it was way too overpowering, so I swapped it out. And now if I want more intense orange, I just mix in a bit of warm red, and that works perfect. Next is Aquamarine Mist by White Knight. It's a granulating watercolor, or well, maybe it's color separating. I'm not entirely sure. I added some drops of water here and we will see how the effect looks like when it's dry. Then we have the Turquoise Blue by White Knights. This was one of the first professional watercolors I bought and I absolutely love it. I barely use it, but it's such a beautiful color that I had to have it in my palette. Next is this Bright Blue by Rosa Gallery. And then we have the Ultramarine Spectral, also by Rosa Gallery. This is a granulating ultramarine that I use a lot for my granulation mixes. And I think you can see also from now that most of my watercolors are from whether White Knights, Rosa Gallery, and Van Gogh. Most of them. I do have different brands, but those are the majority of them. Then we have this Indentarine Blue by White Knights. I use it as a substitute for Prussian Blue. I like having both warm and cool blues in my palette, though I do have more cool blues than warm ones in my opinion. And this one is a nice dark cool blue. At the time I was building my palette, Prussian Blue was either out of stock by where I bought my paints, or they were out of my budget, so I did some research and that's how I found the Indanthrene Blue. And last but not least of this row is the White Nights Blue Mist. This is also a granulating watercolor, and we will see how it looks like later on when it has dried up. Here we have Pyroline Violet by Winsor Newton Professional. I often reach for this when I want a dark magenta that isn't too purple, and it's great for adding depth in florals, and I use it really a lot. Next to it, I've left the spot open. Here was the Van Gogh Dusk Pink, and next to it is the Dusk Pink also, but from Rembrandt. And it's practically the same color, the same shade from the same company. So I've decided to remove the Van Gogh one, and I'm planning to buy a warm red soon. So I'm thinking about placing it here instead. So as a comparison, here are the swatches of the Dusk Pink of Van Gogh compared to Rembrandt. The left one is the Van Gogh Dusk Pink and the right one is the Rembrandt Dusk Pink. Next we have the Rembrandt Chromium Oxide. This is a very beautiful earthy green, I would say. I don't really tend to reach for it that much. I just use it every so and then. However, the White Nights Chromium Oxide is the one that I use a lot because this one granulates much more. I don't even know if the Rembrandt one granulates, to be honest, but the White Nights version is a highly granulating color, and I use it a lot both in granulation mixes as well as for florals because it makes very nice natural greens. Next we have the Rosa Gallery Sap Green. So far I'm still on the hunt for a really nice sap green. I used to have the sap green from Soleil, which contains PG8, as well as the White Nights Green, also with PG8. It's a really beautiful green. I used it a lot, but unfortunately it's not light fast. And that's why I'm using this sap green from Rosa Gallery interchangeably with the Van Gogh sap green. And I think this Van Gogh sap green is like my my second or third refill already so far. Then I have the Renaissance Golden Green. This is a very beautiful olive-like green, but it's a little bit more on the cooler side compared to this White Nights Olive Green. And I use these two also quite interchangeably. Then we have the Dusk Green by Van Gogh. It's a really nice granulating color, quite similar to the Dusk Pink showed earlier, and I really like it. I use it interchangeably with this White Night Green shadows. When I want to make my greens cool and dark, I use the Dusk Green. And I mean warm and dark, I use the Dusk Green, and when I want to make my watercolors more cold and dark, then I use the green shadows. Next we have the Rosa Gallery Coral. This is a very recent addition to my palette. I love it. I've had it for about a week now, and I've already used it a lot, especially for florals. And I feel like it's like a pastel color, but even so, I find it to be very beautiful for flowers. Then there's the Van Gogh Permanent Red Deep. It's just a really nice red, but I find that it does fade a little bit when it dries. Then I have this Rosa Gallery Madder Brown. It's like having a dark version of a warm red, and it works really great as a dark warm red, and I just love it. I'll use it a lot for darkening my red tone colors. Then I also have the Rosa Gallery Pyrrole Red as well as the Madder Red, and I'm thinking about removing one of these two, perhaps because I find them to be very close to each other, and I actually don't really tend to reach for either of them or just one of them. Like for me, it doesn't really matter which one I have. One is just a little warmer, another one is a little cooler. So perhaps I'll be removing them as well as the Van Gogh Permanent Red Deep, and maybe changing them with something a bit similar to Cadmium Red but non-toxic. The primary magenta that I use is this White Night Queen Violet Rose. It's like a primary magenta. I mean, it's made with PV19 and it has a 3-star light fastness rating. However, I've had like a swatch of this color hanging on my wall just as a swatch, and I found out that like almost after a year it's sort of like slightly faded on the top layer. I don't know if it was the paper or it was just my eyes, but I think I should do a proper light fastness test for this one. Next, we have the Rosa Gallery Quinacridone Purple or Lilac. I don't remember if I wrote the name correctly here, but I use this a lot for my base mixes. So it's very strong and overpowering, but it's really nice to make different purple shades. And last but not least on this row, we have this White Nights Hematite Mist. I use it a lot for super dark red or purple accents. Next we have the Schminke Hochadam Potter's Pink. I use this one a lot too in my granulation mixes. I do quite a bit of painting with granulating effects, so I like having a single pigment granulating color that I can mix with others to make a granulating mix. Then I have the Van Gogh Dusk Yellow, which is a part of the Van Gogh Dusk series, I guess. And then next is the Winsor & Newton Ultramarine. This is, I think, Cotman. Yes, and I use it interchangeably with the Rosa Gallery Ultramarine Spectral, but only for granulation mixes. Like, let's say if I'm painting just the sky, then I need an ultramarine blue, then I'll use the Rosa Gallery. But if I want to make like a granulation mix, then I would go most of the time for the Winsor & Newton. Then I have the Van Gogh Buff Titanium, which I use as a white. I use it a lot to create pastel tones, and I find that it kind of granulates too. It's not labeled as granulating, but like if I mix it with, for example, this Cotman Ultramarine, then it will kind of granulate. Next, I have the White Nights Sepia. I actually prefer the Cotman Sepia from Winsor & Newton, but I've had this already in my palette, so I decided to use it until the end and then swap it with the Cotman one. Then I have the Rosa Gallery color. I forgot to label it here, but it's called Golden Brown. It's also a granulating color, and I like having a very dark granulating brown in my palette that I can use as a granulating base if I am mixing with other colors. Next is the White Nights Chromium Iron Oxide, which is a single pigment and granulating color. And there's also the Veroneshkaya Black. I'm actually thinking of taking this one out because it's very low tinting and transparent, which doesn't really fit with the rest of my palette. I tend to like more stronger and opaque colors. And I also don't reach for it very much, I think because of those characteristics. And then I have here the Van Gogh Indigo as well as the Oxide Black. I use the Oxide Black a lot for granulation mixes. All the dusk colors from Van Gogh and Rembrandt contain Oxide Black, which is BBK 11, and it's a beautiful granulating black that works really great for granulation mixes. Next, I have the White Nights Payne's Grey. I use it interchangeably with the Indigo for darkening mixes. For example, like I mix it sometimes with Pyro Orange or Burnt Sienna to create a really nice dark background. Then there's the White Nights Grey Pink Mist, which is a granulating color and one of my absolute favorites in this whole palette. I use it often, well though not as much as like yellow, of course, but whenever I need dark accents, this is a mix base that I go for. Next is the White Nights Ultramarine Violet. I often find it, I find it to have a low tinting strength, which can be kind of frustrating, but it does granulate and makes beautiful mixes. So I never use it on its own because I don't really like it that way that much. I do prefer the dioxazine violet more. It's very strong and a little goes a long way, but the ultramarine violet does granulate instead of the dioxazine, so that's why I still keep the ultramarine violet in my palette. And finally, my absolute favorite, the Sunset Mist. It's a granulating purple with hints of yellow in it, which makes it perfect for sunset effects, just like the name. But I also use it a lot in florals, in purple flowers, and then add a bit of yellow to it, so it creates a really, really beautiful mix. And this is how they look like when they have dried. Okay, now let's move on to the pastel colors. These are colors that I don't really use that much, and I do reach for the pinks occasionally, like the rose quartz, the pink peony, and the coral from White Nights. I do use them interchangeably for flowers and for blushes when I make portraits. Then there's the mocha. I tried to use it as a sand color, but I haven't had much success with it so far. I actually find pastel watercolors in general a bit tricky to work with. But I'm trying to explore more subjects, like flowers or objects, or like antique clay vases maybe would fit this mocha very well. Okay, next is the White Nights Warm Green. I literally only used it like for swatching, and that's it. I feel ashamed to say this, but I practically never used it because I find it to be quite of an unnatural color. Although now that I'm thinking about it, maybe I could mix it with oranges to make more of a usable color. I might try that. Okay, then I have the Petersburg Ochre. I bought this one originally to use in mixes. I never really use it as a standalone color. I mix it with others to create something like buff titanium, but with a brownish linen color. It helps mute down all the colors and make them a bit more pastel-y too. Next are the Rosa Gallery Naples Yellow Light as well as the Naples Rose. I find them to be pretty and less opaque than the White Nights one. I also haven't had the occasion to use any of those that much, but I do find the Rosa Gallery Naples Yellow Light and Naples Rose really pretty, so I think maybe I could try to paint some peaches tomorrow with these. I think that's a great idea. I'm anyway doing the voiceover right now, like in the middle of the night. So, well, I'm one of those artists where the idea pop up in the middle of the night. So I kind of have ideas on how I could use them. Then I have the White Nights Royal Blue as well as the Rosa Gallery Royal Blue. They're a little different, but kind of the same. I use them sometimes for skies or when I paint florals, but not too often. And then I have the White Nights Lavender as well as the Van Gogh Lavender. I do tend to reach more for the Van Gogh Lavender. And this is actually like the most used colors out of everything here. And I find it to be granulating, so it's very, very pretty. And yeah, the Van Gogh Naples Yellow, Red, I hardly use it at all. Okay, and this is how they look like when they have dried. And this was it for today about my watercolor supplies. I hope you enjoyed this video and thank you very much for sticking until the end. I'll see you next week again for another video. Until then, take care. Bye bye!